All right, we're back for another short web lecture on, or not so short in the case of the last one. This time it's on Chapter 12 and the evolution of life history and parental care. This builds on our in-class discussion of sexual selection, ties into some of the things we'll talk about in the evolution of humans, and some of the issues that came up in the other web lecture in Chapter 16 on social behavior. So across both plants, animals, even fungi and microbes, there's a lot of variation in life history traits. These are traits that indicate how long an organism lives and when important aspects of its life occur. Birth, the length of development, whether it has a larval phase, when it has children, what time of year it has children, how long it lives after having children. In plants, this can be the variation from an annual plant, like many of our important crops, to long-lived trees like this bristlecone pine. It also encompasses when plants reproduce, when they generate new leaves or branches. All of this is part of the study of life history. In animals, this is when they mate, as well as when they have children, which is not always when they mate, and a variety of other processes that we can encompass under life history. Ultimately, the study of life history, as in many other parts of biology, is a study of trade-offs. If there's a limited amount of energy to go around to invest in survival, maintenance, and reproduction, how an organism allocates among these things is important to understanding its success. And ultimately, this study of trade-offs, although central to all of evolutionary biology, is particularly important for understanding how organisms live and when they do what they do. So natural selection is something we expect to optimize these allocations in the light of trade-offs. An organism wants to maximize the number of, if we think anthropogenically, an organism will maximize the number of offspring that survive to maturity. And this depends on the likelihood of surviving to different age classes. So there's many studies of this. One from opossums suggests that in island and mainland settings where several aspects of their ecology differ, there are different allocations among different parts of different allocations to and different longevities that occur as a consequence of that. Part of what drives this are differences in predation risk. So in Trinidadian guppies, which differ depending on whether they live in streams in Trinidad and Tobago. And some of those streams have been dammed so that larger predators, bigger fish, may not be in some of those mountain streams. So in low predation sites, they tend to live longer and get bigger, while in high predation sites, they have a very rapid lifespan where they reproduce at smaller sizes and tend to sort of get it over with before they get eaten by a bigger fish. So these differences in Trinidadian guppies can be quite striking, and they've evolved over a small number of generations because of very strong selection pressure from other predatory fish. So transplant experiments using guppies can show that these traits are under strong selection. So if you move low predation guppies that get big and are sort of slow to a high predation environment, they just get nailed. All right, so there are other places where we can look at this trade-off between reproduction and growth and survival, such as in Noli lizards, where changes in body length differ among different habitats. So the key concept in this, and one to take away from this whole part of the course, is that trade-offs arise when investment in one trait results in lower investment in another trait. Ultimately, investment in reproduction is often at the expense of that in growth or maintenance, and selection can favor alleles that are beneficial early in life, even if they're deleterious late in life. And there are even a few human diseases, such as Huntington's, that may in part be due to this. All right, so investment in early reproduction often reduces reproduction late in life. So an important part of this trade-off is parental investment. Across animals, females are more likely than males to provide parental care. Males often have less investment in the offspring, and in some cases they have uncertain paternity. And cases of sexual role reversal really show this point, where females compete over access to males. So in our class on sexual selection, I mentioned pipefish, where males care for the eggs, and it's females who tend to compete for the attention of males. So this is a striking example that really shows the point. So organisms that can regulate the number of offspring they have in a number of ways. Often having more offspring leads to higher chances that all of them will do poorly, that there won't be enough resources to go into them all being successful. And limiting the number of offspring may be the best way to have any offspring survive at all. So miscarriages or abortions are common in a number of animals. They're also common in plants, where a plant may not have enough resources to develop all of the eggs that it has, and some are aborted. And there are a number of animals where cannibalism is common among offspring, where the first tadpole to grow may eat many of the other tadpoles as it develops. Or in fig wasps, I believe there's some evidence of cannibalism as well, so that there'll be one offspring that's big enough to survive and do well. In addition, many animals can regulate their sex ratio to maximize their fitness, as males and females may perform or may have different fitnesses depending on their size. So in sand gobies, there is cannibalizing of eggs, so that there ends up being one or a few offspring that are big enough to do well. This depends in part on the amount of oxygen that's present. So these behaviors are often quite plastic. It's the same in many tadpoles as well. Sex ratios are often unbalanced, but in most animals they ultimately are balanced, and that's because of frequency-dependent selection. So when one sex is rarer, it is going to tend to be favored. It's simply going to be more limiting, so it will do better. But this isn't always the case. So females can alter the sex ratio. This is particularly striking in haplodiploid organisms such as bees, wasps, and ants, where most of the organisms are females. And this is easy to modulate in these organisms because females are diploids and males are haploids. And most of the organisms, most of the individuals in, say, ants or bees, tend to be females because they stick around the nest and help as workers in large colonies that are very ecologically successful. All right, so Robert Trivers-Willard developed a hypothesis that mothers will alter sex ratios depending on their condition, where in many animals they produce females when they're in poor condition and produce males when they're in good condition, because males are most likely to benefit from being large. This isn't always true, but in many animals this is true. There are some fish where, in fact, they're able to switch sexes, and usually they start as females but switch to males when they're larger, because large males do well. And since some of these fish, like this one, tend to live in patches on coral reefs, if you remove the large male, within a few days, the largest female who's left will start to switch to being the next big male. Sometimes this happens the other way. In Seychelles warblers, it's the females that are favored with high resources. And this is because daughters stick around the nest to help. If resources are limiting, they tend to have males because they disperse away to other habitats. All right, so across animals, it's usually females who provide parental care. That's in part because female maternity is almost always guaranteed in animals, so caring for the young makes sense, but the reversals, like pipefish, provide exciting places to test these theories. Frequency-dependent selection means that in most animals there's going to be about 50-50, and the Trivers-Willard hypothesis gives some principles for when investment in the sexes should differ. There can be conflicts in animals over parental care, and this is in part because a male, if he's going to mate with many females, wants that female to invest as much as possible in his offspring, while a female may have other offspring later in her life, or there may be a cost to her reproducing that can risk her own life, and thus she may invest less in the offspring. So competition among siblings for parental investment is one of these. In baby birds, this can be particularly striking, but we may observe this for those of us who have siblings in our own families. There's some excellent studies in American coots showing that the color of birds is part of that. This is also true in the size of hatchlings, which may differ, or in behavior towards runts in a variety of animals. Another area where we're just starting to learn a lot is in the idea of genomic imprinting. So an important factor that affects gene expression is methylation. So some genes can be silenced by placing methyl or acetyl groups on a section of DNA that causes it to be compacted by histones. And in doing this, those genes are less likely to be expressed. And in many animals, one parent or the other has their DNA methylated in a way that silences it. So this can affect things like coat color, where one gene or the other occurs in some organisms. The female, if the female is XX, you can get variation in color across the organism because either the parental or the maternal X chromosome is expressed. We happen to have an expert here at FIU, Chema Aaron Lopez. He teaches other sections of this course, who's an expert in methylation. So in some animals, genomic imprinting leads to parental conflict. So in mice, the male, who tends to mate with a number of females, wants his offspring to be as big as possible. So there are growth inhibiting and promoting genes that may come from the mother and the father. And the mother is going to tend to silence those so that the offspring aren't too big, while the father's genes are going to tend to promote those. And one can, now that we know some of the genes involved in this, experimentally silence or remove these. In mice, it's possible to, in fact, very easily create transgenic mice that may or may not have these. So looking at the crosses, one can study this carefully. There's some evidence that in lions and tigers, which produce, depending on who the mother and who the father is, tigons or ligers, there's some evidence that part of the great variation in size between ligers and tigons is due to genomic imprinting that varies between lions and tigers. So parental care is often rife with conflict, and this is one of the reasons that it can evolve into so many different fascinating ways. And what maximizes fitness may differ among the sexes. In general, males benefit when the mother invests more in their current offspring, while females benefit by saving resources for future offspring. Parental conflict can lead to battles in gene expression, as well as into some of the very interesting behaviors that we observe in animals. Another part of life history theory it focuses on the idea of senescence. So there's evidence from a range of organisms, from fruit flies to rodents to humans, that caloric restriction can slow the aging process. So the genes involved in repair are switched on under stress and may allow flies or humans to live longer if they don't eat too much. But this may involve trade-offs, so that mutants that age more slowly may have lower fitness. and there's evidence of this in fruit flies as well. And senescence is ultimately a trade-off between reproducing early in life and longevity. In humans, we have particularly long post-reproductive lives compared to other primates. We live far too long and have sort of grandparent years that other primates don't have. And there are some explanations for menopause in humans. This doesn't occur in human males who remain fertile well into at least partially fertile well into their later years. One hypothesis is that mothers risk reproduction at older age, and this selects for reduced fertility. Until very recently, most women died, or many women died during childbirth. Perhaps not most, but many women died during childbirth. And later in life, the risks of this became even higher, particularly after many previous births. So reduced fertility in later life may save women from some of this fate. A second hypothesis, and they're not necessarily mutually exclusive, is the grandmother hypothesis, that a loss of fertility is associated with a shift towards investment in grandchildren. The grandmothers raise many of us, myself in part included, and that the presence of grandmothers may be so important to human success that sort of post-reproductive period, particularly in women, is favored. So menopause is distinct to humans, and there are at least two reasons why it may be adaptive. So with that, I'd like to stop and look forward to talking to you in this next web lecture.